Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. Kargil Vijay Diwas, the day when India commemorates its victory over Pakistan in the war of 1999. It was on this day, 26th of July 1999, when the Indian Army announced successful culmination of Operation Vijay, declaring victory after a nearly 3-month-long battle on the icy heights of Kargil in Ladakh. Hailing the day as a symbol of extraordinary bravery, valour and determination of our armed forces, President Draupadi Murmu paid homage to the brave soldiers who laid down their lives in the war. Prime Minister Narendra Modi called Kargil Vijay Diwas a symbol of pride and glory for the country. Indeed, the nation bows down to the valour and indomitable courage of its soldiers and remembers with gratitude those who made the supreme sacrifice to raise India's flag to victory. But this costly victory also taught us many lessons. 23 years on, how have we strengthened ourselves in the face of new challenges? This and much more in perspective today with an illustrious panel joining me on the program. Absolute pleasure to welcome in the studio Mr. Sunil Mishra, Director General, Society of Indian Defence Manufacturers, and Group Captain Anupam Banerjee, retired. He's a Kargil War veteran. Also joining us virtually is Captain Akhilesh Saxena, retired. He too is a Kargil War veteran. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on this edition of Perspective on Sansad TV. Absolute pleasure to have two war veterans join us on the program. So let me begin the program first with you. Captain, this question must have been asked to you multiple times over the last 2 decades and more, in fact, about, revisiting your experiences of the war. But because these experiences are, an inspiration also for the youngers who look forward to serve the country, join the armed forces, I would like to, request you to reminisce your experience once again on this platform about this, very, very deadly conflict. To say we were, of course, caught off guard. We were backstabbed by our, hostile neighbor. So what really you went through during the war? We emerged victorious, but of course at a huge cost.
Yes, ma'am. When we talk about Kargil operations, it is generally Op Vijay, which was the army operations which gets highlighted. But there is also a very important part of that entire operation was Operation Safed Sagar, which was the Indian Air Force operation that started a few days later after Operation Vijay was launched. In fact, to be precise, if my memory serves me right, it was on 26th May that Operation Safed Sagar was launched. And Operation Safed Sagar, along with Operation Vijay, paved the way for the victory. We all know how the background and how Operation Vijay happened, so I'll not go into that. But I will restrict myself to the air operations because I took part in the air operation. It was many first. No other Air Force, I dare say, in the past has operated in this kind of targets which are at this kind of altitude. Because the targets were at an altitude of about 4.5 to 5 kilometers. So generally in the World War, Second World War or the conflicts which happened by India, even in 1962 war, the Air Force was not fully utilized. So probably in the history of the world, for the first time, fighter aircrafts were operating at such high altitude. So it required a lot of adaptation of the tactics. The targets were not usually the targets which an Air Force pilot is trained to attack, smaller targets. So it required a lot of adaptation. And also, that was the first time that Indian Air Force used precision ammunitions. The visuals of a Tiger Hill bombing by a Mirage 2000 aircraft or a Muntadalo bombing, actually, when the intruders started getting the air attacks from the third dimension, and when it converted into precision attack, I think that would have played a very large role in the decision matrix of the Pakistanis. So it was a story of many firsts, story of valor. It was an operation of 2.5 months. All the 3 streams of Indian Air Force took part. We lost 1 helicopter and 2 fighters, 1 MiG-21 and 1 MiG-27. We lost air warriors, and we lost a large number of the army colleagues. So my salute to all of them in today's day, now that we are revisiting the day. My, my naman to all of them.
Absolutely. The nation will always remain indebted to the supreme sacrifice of the, more than 500 soldiers who laid down their lives. But before I go across to Captain Saxena, a quick question, Captain, from you, because I have known you through this, image which has been viral on the internet, perhaps, and very, very powerful message coming in from a difficult time. A younger version of you standing beside, a bomb, perhaps, with a message which says, "Zor ka jhatka." I would like you to share with us and our viewers, the context of that image, when was it taken, and in those difficult times, the idea behind that message for the enemy.
You see, in a Air Force squadron, it is those 15 to 16 fighter pilots who are very lucky to get airborne in that aircraft. But a large number of men, their work goes behind that effort. If a pilot has to take off at 6 o'clock, actually the work starts at 2 o'clock. When somebody comes, prepares the aircraft. And those people who were in the squadron were very charged up. And they also wanted to, be part of it. They were part of it. But somebody came up with this idea that these bombs are going to be dropped in any way. Can we write some graffitis? Not that the enemy was going to read it there, but it made them feel connected little more to the operation. This Zor ka jhatka dheere se lagi was actually a catch line of a soft drink. Yes. And there are many more very, very interesting lines, direct messages to the Prime Minister and the President. So there were many very innovative ways. But that was the way our men connected with that war directly. So, and it became very, very, when the media actually highlighted few of these bombs and it came out in the national media, that became, in fact, till today, in every Kargil Vijay Diwas or the time this picture is made. But the basic thing was that was how our air warriors, who are a very integral part of a squadron operation, connected directly. Absolutely. In a very innovative way.
It is this grit, this determination, and this light-heartedness as well, even in such difficult times, that took us to victory. Captain Saxena, you too are a living example of this grit and passion that we've been talking about on the program today. Thank you for your time, and in fact, it's my privilege to be engaging in this conversation today with you. Captain Banerjee spoke about his experience. You, of course, were in a different domain. Tell us about how was your experience? How difficult was it for the army to actually, pull through this battle where we were caught off guard? Of course, there is, no denying the fact that this particular war came as a surprise to us. We were having a good, friendly conversation with our neighbor when we were backstabbed.
Yeah. No, you're right. And first, just I'd like to tell you that this was the most difficult war which India has ever faced. You know why? Because in each of the war, it may be, 47, 62, 65 or 71, both enemy and we were nearly on the equal platform. But in this war, enemy has taken the advantage of the situation. And, we were totally unaware. We didn't know how many enemies are sitting on top. And let me tell you, in mountain warfare, if enemy is sitting on top, he's at least 20 times more powerful, right? You can imagine a situation, somebody is sitting on a cliff. Even if he will throw a stone, there will be casualty. So Pakistani captured all these peaks. And, just to give you a history, these were the winter vacated posts. Yes. Means no army was staying on these posts during winter. And they took advantage of this situation. And once in summer, after, around September, October, both the forces came down, Pakistan started sending its troops slowly in white clothes, so they cannot be detected by the satellite. And by the time, summer came, there were thousands of soldiers across the NH1. And all these peaks are running across NH1. The main aim was to cut the supply line to Leh Ladakh, block the supply and isolate entire Leh Ladakh, and maybe, as a part to capture this entire thing from the India. The temperature was in minus 15 to minus 18 degrees centigrade. And actually, we didn't know where the enemy is sitting. Even location was not known because they were all trained soldiers. They were sitting inside bunkers. Their guns were pointing towards us. Pakistan artillery was in position and they were continuously bringing fire on all Indian army, which was mostly in, open. So when we got this kind of situation and our initial attacks were failed, right? Because we didn't know where is the enemy, Absolutely. What is the ammunition, what is the firepower. And, first case where Captain Saurabh Kalia has gone with his troops And he was not aware how many enemies sitting during that particular post. So they captured him, and initial few attacks were not successful. Then what happened? Then we slowly start realizing that these are not few terrorists which is sitting on the top. This is a full-fledged war, and also a war where enemy has already taken the advantage. Like, chances of victory for enemy was 95% compared to us, because everything was in their favor. They also knew we will bring our air force, so they were also having the Stinger missiles with them. They were also even aware that there could be a chemical warfare. We caught them with a chemical mask. So they were really prepared, and they were dig deep just to ensure that at least for 3-4 months, they cannot be evacuated from those posts. And then winter come in, and they become the permanent settlement for the Pakistan.
Certainly. So huge challenges we faced during the war, but of course the fact is that we emerged victorious, Mr. Mishra. No doubt there have been multiple learning lessons for us. Over the 2 decades, if we look back, what are the lessons that the Kargil War has taught us in terms of strengthening our capabilities? Of course, 2 decades have gone by. So which are the areas, on which we are now focusing on, which are our thrust areas, and the kind of role that the industry has also played in terms of, strengthening our capabilities, our defense, our strategic initiatives?
Yeah. First of all, I would like to salute from the industry side to our armed forces, which played such a big role in moving out the Pakistani forces from our border. While a group of Indian armed forces youngsters were there at the forefront, everybody remembers that the whole nation was behind them. Before I come to the capability in terms of warfare and ammunition and equipment, etc., I go back to immediately after the Kargil conflict. The Indian Army had given a call to the Indian industry as to what we can do at the line of actual control, where a lot of villages from their side had come to our side, because the line of actual control had shifted villages. I happened to be sent to Kargil and Dras from Confederation of Indian Industry at that point of time, and surveyed a lot of villages along the LOC, and found that the basic need which we need to fulfill is give the youth capacity to earn, make them employable. And I'm talking about 2000. Employability, skills, etc. have come much later. So that identification also led the Indian Army to start Operation Sadbhavna in that line of actual control. Operation Sadbhavna was very important after Kargil, because it gave skills to the local population, youth, women and men, in a variety of vocations. From the industry side, a very important initiative was carried on, which was supported by Hindustan Motors and Maruti Udyog, where we sent master craftsmen, master trainers, along with cut sections of the engine and everything. If you are familiar with the Jozila Pass, if a civilian vehicle is going into Jozila, wanting to reach Ladakh, Leh, or the nearby area, if the army does not support you and you have a puncture, tire puncture, you are dead. There's nothing. So this youth was trained along the LOAC in breakdown maintenance of vehicles. And with the help of Prime Minister Rozgar Yojana, where some 1 lakh rupees or something used to be given by State Bank of India, we were able to give them, the trained youth, the tools and things to start their small little workshops. Mm-hmm. What is very important at the line of actual control from a larger perspective is that the youth is not left unemployed, which Army is doing through its other initiatives which are focused on this. So from industry also, I think that is something which I very fondly recall, that we were able to be part of the post-conflict, some sort of a rehabilitation process.
Absolutely. And whenever we face a war, it's not just the armed forces, it's the entire country that has to rally behind something that we saw in the Kargil war, although there was initial debacle, Captain Banerjee. But, talking about the lessons, you've been part of the war, you've seen the challenges, and now you've also seen the kind of progress we have made towards some of the proposals that the Kargil committee review also suggested in terms of, the lessons learned and the kind of implementations to strengthen our capabilities. So in about 23 years after the Kargil war, what are the kind of transformations that have come about and something that still remains, something that we are still yet to see?
So, the Kargil Review Committee had various, they looked into overall everything. It started right from the higher defense reforms, which has now fructified with the creation of a DMA, that is the Department of Military Affairs, and the appointment of CDS that happened. That was one of the recommendations also of the Kargil Review Committee. There were recommendations toward the modernization of the armed forces. Some of them have taken a lot of time. Just to tell you a fact is that during Kargil war, the Indian Air Force had a definitive edge over the Pakistani Air Force in terms of the reach of its missile, the long distance missiles, which we call beyond visual range missile. In fact, Pakistani Air Force that time was not equipped with BVRs. And that was one of the reasons why in fact, when we were undertaking the operation, the Pakistani Air Force was very much present on their side of the, border across the LOC. But they never came closer to us because of the capability gap that existed. And we also never crossed the LOC, so it never went into a full scale. But after that, there has been a lull, quite a lot of lull, and a lot of delay that had happened in terms of modernizing the Air Force, which finally came with the procurement of Rafale. Actually, that process started immediately after 1999, during the first NDA government, that the Mirage 2000s were supposed to be replaced, that 126 fighter. That took a lot of time, and finally we are still into it. So some part of it, the reforms took time, but there is a lot of place where the reforms have happened. And one of the things that happened is, that time some of the friendly countries, they stood by us. Yes. Overnight, Indian Air Force, Indian Army, they changed their thing because we got some,
and despite
support.
the sanctions that we were
Absolutely.
facing because of Pokhran.
But the need was felt that finally India has to come on its own sometime, because every time you may not have
Absolutely,
friends.
and I think that is where the emphasis, Mr. Mishra, has lately been. In recent years, we've seen the kind of emphasis, the thrust on becoming Atmanirbhar. I think that is one of our shortcomings, that we are majorly dependent on other countries for arms. And if we talk about the Atmanirbhar Bharat initiative, particularly for defense production, a lot is, of course, being spoken about. But in terms of progress, in terms of, promoting startups, in terms of promoting the private players into defense production, what is the kind of progress that we've made?
Of late, we have made a lot of progress. After Kargil, there was a lot of discussion about, not exactly Atmanirbhar was not the word, about modernizing our forces. But in the last about 4 or 5 years, we have seen a lot of policy reforms, a lot of policy getting into place, which is very important for the domestic industry to step into the defense manufacturing. For example, in the last couple of years, we have had 3 indigenization lists, positive lists. Now, the equipment which is listed in those lists cannot be bought from outside now. So we have to produce, our own industry has to produce those equipments. Now, this is a very good step, very positive step. There are different type of mechanisms which are now available to domestic industry for participating in the defense procurement process. And Indian industry is very enthused about it. I have been traveling across the country in the last phase of COVID and even after that, including the defense corridors which have been made in Uttar Pradesh and Tamil Nadu, and meeting entrepreneurs there. The amount of interest, enthusiasm which they have is phenomenal. The larger industry which has been there into it for the last about 20 years is there with renewed vigor. For the startups, etc., there is a program of the Government of India which is called IDEX, and there is a startup challenge. They have started bearing fruits. Now, many of these IDEX winners who have come up with novel solutions to problem statements in which SIDM has been an integral part.
Absolutely. Good to hear about these initiatives where, both the public and the private sector are coming together to strengthen our defense capabilities, because Captain Saxena, at the end of the day, what's important is each year we talk about, the Kargil Vijay Diwas, the kind of challenges that our soldiers had to face, and more than 500 soldiers had to also lay down their lives for the country. But I think the most befitting tribute would be to ensure that we are never in future faced with a similar kind of conflict, with a similar kind of war. So in this, new emerging kind of challenges, it's described as a two-front war. We have two hostile neighbors and, changing dynamics of war threats as well. What is the kind of improvement? What is the kind of, initiatives that you would expect, because you've seen the challenges and you've seen the journey after the aftermath of the war as well?
Yeah, and I think, the role of equipment is very important in this war. If you really see, we could not get the success in the initial attack, and Tololing was the first example where we kind of, could not get success after 2-3 attacks. Then role of Air Force as a part of Safed Sagar and role of artillery came into play. That Tololing was mostly the success story where we were firing 105 guns, and Bofors was just one part of it. We also used Bofors in a direct firing role, which was an innovation. So now, if we really want to save the life, we need to modernize, right? And I think the same thing has been echoed by the panel. So there were definitely lefts, and there were cases where a lot of improvement has to come. Kargil Review Committee given a lot of, recommendation. But yes, it takes time, because despite being a very good gun, Bofors was into various controversies. So nobody wanted to take a time. So it took time for, decisive decision making. And now Indian artillery, which is now will play a very important part in this kind of warfare. Now we have got K9 Vajra as a part of Indian artillery. We have got Dhanush and we have got 777. So these are the guns which has given such a devastating firepower to Indian artillery. In the similar way, our Air Force is also kind of, ramping up with a new weapon system and fighter planes like Rafale. Other than this, the drones are going to play a very important role, right? So it's not a conventional war where you are fighting in kind of Rajasthan. But if you fight in this kind of warfare where you have to identify the enemy at a localized area, then drones are the next level of weapon which are going to play a very important role. So
certainly,
I will say,
yes, India has to be prepared for such, hybrid attack scenarios in the future, and especially what we've witnessed in the border states, Captain Banerjee, especially in Punjab, infiltration through the use of drones. So that is one concerning area. But another significant point that I want to quickly touch upon is the importance of theatre commands for the tri-services. Now, this is one announcement that the Defence Minister made as part of the Kargil Vijay Diwas celebrations. I want to relate this to a question which is often cited by defense experts from the context of the Kargil war. And they often say that had there been more synergy, more coordination between the three wings of the armed forces, perhaps the debacle, the devastation for our side could have been less. Do you think theatre commands for all tri-services could, take care of that concern? It is going to ensure more coordination among the three services?
Integration is definitely something that is required. Any war today has to be an integrated approach. And when I say integration, it is not only between the armed forces, it's the whole nation approach, where even industry is a part of the whole thing. So the integration is the way forward. There is no doubt about that. As far as theatre command is concerned, there are certain concerns regarding how the model will be, because the theatre command model is, there are some theatre commands which are for the nation, countries which have got a global ambition, so they have a very large geographies to look after the theatre command. So how and what way that thing happened, I think the higher defense management is still trying to find out. But I will say the integration is definitely the answer. And as far as Kargil war was concerned, yes, there were certain areas which were of concern. One of them was intelligence sharing. Like I can give you a personal example. When you get onto an attack over a hilltop, which is a very small attack, you get 35 to 30 seconds to actually identify the target, align and fire. unless you've got a very good picture of the target and you know what is the target, how it looks like, it becomes very difficult. Otherwise, it becomes like a blind bombing. So, in those days, we did not have those kind of pictures. There were hardly any, surveillance which was available in terms of UAVs. So all those reforms that happened in terms of getting the UAVs as part of the inventory of the Indian Armed Forces has happened post Kargil. I mentioned about the precision weapon. Mountain warfare, because Jammu and Kashmir is definitely an area flashpoint, and when mountain warfare happens, you have to have very, very good precision bombing capability. With that time, we were at a nascent stage, which is now there today, and more importantly, the communication gap between the soldier on ground and the other two services need to be minimized.
Have all these security gaps been filled over the last 2 decades now that we are, again in a standoff with China and in similar geographical conditions?
Definitely, ma'am. A lot of the gaps have been filled, but it is never possible to fill all the gaps, because when you evolve, your enemy also evolves. So it is not that enemy is static and you're evolving. So it's a continuous race of the technological upgrade. And when there are two enemies which work in very close coordination and they're both nuclear armed, it is a difficult task. So India is not in a happy neighborhood. It's a difficult neighborhood, and it's a continuous process. And this process can never stop. Synergy and integration is definitely going to be the key. And what Captain Saxena maintained, that that high technology areas where India can actually make a difference, I think they will make a lot of difference in the future conflict.
Okay. Mr. Mishra, very quickly, one last comment from you on, we are working towards, of course, modernizing weapons. We have streamlined the procurement also with some of the countries which were in the pipeline for long. But and we are also promoting startups and the industry, but also some areas which still need to be worked upon, according to you?
See, in the last budget, Honorable Prime Minister allocated, Honorable Finance Minister allocated R&D budget, 25% of it for the private industry. That's a path-breaking reform. Indian mind is one of the best in the world. Given the right environment, they have done wonders in Microsoft and NASA and everywhere else. This kind of environment is being provided now. Money and the budgets are there. I'm sure Indian mind will do R&D, which will not only indigenize. Indigenization is, there was something already there and you are making it now. We are going to leapfrog, or rather pole vault into new technologies with the Indian mind.
Absolutely.
I'm sure about that.
With that very positive remark, I'll have to wind up the program. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on this edition of Perspective today and sharing your experiences, your thoughts with us and our viewers. Absolute pleasure to have you both in the studio, and Captain Saxena for joining us virtually on the program. It's my pleasure to have you, on this program and have a engaging conversation with you. Look forward to have you more on our programs. So with that, I'll wrap up the program. That's it from us, viewers. Thank you for your time as well. I'll see you same time tomorrow now. Until then, take care of yourselves and keep watching Sansad TV.